The year is 1470. High in the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings for the last time across a valley that will never hear it again. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women kneel in prayer. Their lips move together, speaking the same words they've repeated every morning for years. But today, those words feel different, heavy, bitter, like goodbye. Outside the stone walls, the horizon glows red, not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has already crushed entire kingdoms. The Ottoman army doesn't march, it moves like a river of steel and fire, wiping out everything in its path. Sister Alani, the abbess, holds a silver crucifix passed down through 3 generations. Her hands shake, but not from fear. She knows what's coming, they all do. What they don't know, what no one could have imagined, is that death would have been mercy, because the next part of this story was never taught in any classroom. It was buried, erased, hidden under centuries of silence. Until now, what happened here wasn't just conquest, it was something colder, something intentional, something historians are only now beginning to piece together. The real question isn't whether you can handle the truth. It's whether you're willing to remember it. If you've ever wondered why some stories vanish from history while others are repeated forever, you're in the right place. Here on Crimson Historians, we dig through the archives the world tried to forget: missionary letters, Ottoman state papers, testimonies sealed inside Vatican records. Every view, like, and subscription helps us pull one more forgotten voice out of the dark. Now let's go back to that convent, because the bell has gone silent and the doors won't hold much longer. To understand what happened to these women, you have to understand the machine that came for them. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople had fallen. The jewel of Christendom, standing for over 1,000 years, collapsed after 53 days of cannon fire and bloodshed. The Hagia Sophia, once the greatest cathedral on earth, had its crosses torn down within hours. Its mosaics were plastered over, its bells melted, and within a week, the call to prayer echoed from domes that had carried Christian hymns for 9 centuries. Sultan Mehmed II stood inside that ancient church and declared it a mosque. Not because he needed another place to pray, but because he understood something most conquerors overlook. You don't defeat a people by killing them, you defeat them by erasing who they were. The Ottomans weren't just taking land, they were taking identity. When Mehmed looked west at the scattered remains of the Byzantine world, he saw wounds that refused to heal. Every ringing church bell, every monastery still standing, every cross casting a shadow on conquered ground. These were acts of resistance. Signs the old world wasn't ready to die, and every nun who still prayed in Latin was living proof that faith could outlast armies. So the Sultan made a choice. If they won't convert, they'll disappear. Not through slaughter, because slaughter breeds martyrs. Martyrs spark rebellion, their stories get told, the dead become legends. No, Mehmed used something far quieter, a method that left behind no songs, no stories, no trace. Erasure. By 1470, this strategy had already been tested across the empire. Greek monasteries in Thrace, Serbian convents in the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. Not all were destroyed. Some were turned into Ottoman buildings, some abandoned. But the pattern stayed the same. First came the offer, then the silence. The convent of St. Catherine, perched alone on a Thessalian hillside far from any ally or garrison, was about to become another experiment, another erased footnote in an expanding empire. But these women didn't think of themselves as footnotes. They weren't fighters. They were women who had devoted their lives to silence and prayer. Their weapons were rosaries. Their armor was faith. Most had never even seen a soldier. Sister Alani had been abbess for 12 years. Before that, she cared for the sick in a village wiped out by the plague of 1448. She joined the convent not to escape the world, but to try to understand it. Sister Magdalena was 19, only 2 years into her vows. Her hands still showed calluses from her father's farm. She came here after her family was killed in a raid. The convent was the only place she had felt safe. Sister Theodora was 70. She had survived 2 abbesses, an emperor, and more wars than she could remember. She had stopped fearing death long ago, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. If this moment in history doesn't make you want to learn more, you might be missing the lesson their generation died to teach. The most dangerous thing you can do in the face of power is refuse to forget who you are. Now watch what happens when faith collides with empire. The first cannonball hits just after dawn. It doesn't strike the chapel, it hits the bell tower. The explosion is deafening. Stone bursts into the air. Iron screams against iron. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years shatters mid-swing, scattering pieces across the courtyard where the sisters grow herbs for healing. The same hands that cared for the sick now cover their ears, shaking. Sister Alani doesn't scream. She rises, lifts her crucifix, and begins to sing. Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. One by one, the others join her, their voices rising together against the roar of an empire. But empires don't listen to songs. By midday, the gates break open. Ottoman soldiers flood into the courtyard, not swinging swords, but carrying ledgers, quills, ink pots. They move through the convent like clerks, not conquerors. Counting, recording, cataloguing, because to them, these women aren't individuals. They're inventory. A translator steps forward. A Greek man who once lived in these same hills. His voice trembles as he reads from a scroll, shame woven into every word. By order of Sultan Mehmed Roman II, all subjects of the conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime State. Those who convert will be granted protection. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Alani steps forward, calm, steady. She answers not to the soldiers, but to the translator, speaking Greek so clear that no one misses a word. Tell your Sultan, we already gave our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, Hassan Pasha, whose name appears in Ottoman military records from the 1470 Thessalian campaign, doesn't get angry. Instead, he smiles, and that smile is worse than any threat, because he knows something the nuns do not. The Ottomans have perfected the art of breaking people without killing them. That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, just darkness and the sound of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, carrying on, while the nuns wait to see who breaks first. Two young sisters from Corinth cry in a corner. Their sobs echo against the cold stone. But Sister Magdalena, barely 20, begins whispering a psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Then another, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Slowly the crying stops. This is where the Ottomans miscalculated. These women had spent their entire lives preparing for hardship, fasting, night vigils, silence, discipline, what the soldiers saw as torture. The nuns recognized as their daily devotion, but Hassan Pasha is patient. He has seen this pattern before, in Thrace, in Wallachia, in the ruins of Serbian monasteries where monks believed their faith would protect them. Faith, he once wrote to the Sultan in a letter still preserved in the Topkapi Palace archives, is like a candle. It burns brightest right before it dies. He's about to test that theory. On the second day, the doors open. A servant walks in with bread and water, fresh food, clean water. He sets it down quietly, then leaves. The nuns stare at it. Their throats ache. Their stomachs twist. The younger sisters look toward Alani, desperation shining in their eyes. Sister Theodora, the oldest among them, speaks first. They want us to eat, she says quietly. They want us to feel grateful, to soften. Alani nods, then we fast. No one touches the food. By the third day, their lips are cracked and bleeding. Their hands tremble. The younger sisters can barely stand, but they still don't give in. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed. He's impressed, he's annoyed, and for a split second, something like respect crosses his face. But respect doesn't change plans. On the third day, the doors open again. This time, it's not a servant. It's Hassan himself. He speaks in Turkish. The translator trails behind him like a shadow. You are not criminals, Hassan says. You are not enemies, you are simply mistaken. The Sultan is merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you must do is speak the words, silence, or... He continues, you can come with us to Constantinople. There, the Sultan himself may hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your conviction. He lets the idea hang in the air, but the road is long, and the weak do not survive it. It's not a threat. It's a promise. Sister Eleni looks at her sisters. Some are hardly conscious. Some whisper prayers with their eyes closed. Some stare at the floor, trying to pull strength from the stone beneath their knees. She turns back to Hassan. We will walk. The smile returns to his face. Good. We leave at dawn. That night, the nuns cling to each other in the dark. No one speaks. Then Sister Magdalena starts to hum. A hymn they used to sing at Vespers. One by one, the others join her. Outside, the soldiers hear it. Some pause. Some look away. Years later, one of them will tell his grandson about the women who sang themselves to death. That story will be forgotten too. For now, the hymn slips through the cracks in the chapel walls and floats into the night. A prayer, a plea, a declaration. We are still here. They leave at dawn on the fourth day. 3 women, hands tied with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses, just their feet, the dust, and a sun that shows no mercy. The soldiers don't hurry them. They don't have to. The road is the punishment. By the second day, Sister Irene collapses. She's 62. Her knees have been failing for years. She tries to stand, but her legs won't cooperate. The soldiers keep moving. Sister Magdalena and another nun, Sister Anna, hoist Irene between them and carry her for 3 more miles. When they finally stop for the night, Irene is unconscious. By morning, she's gone. They bury her by the roadside with their bare hands. No tools, no ceremony, just dirt and whispered prayers. The soldiers watch. They don't interfere. Hassan Pasha writes in his ledger, 22 remaining. On the 4th day it happens again. Sister Callista, who hasn't spoken a word since the siege began, simply stops walking. She sits down in the middle of the road, closes her eyes, and refuses to move. They leave her there. By the time they reach the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 women remain. But something has changed on that road. Something the Ottomans didn't plan for. The nuns stop crying. They stop begging. They walk in silence, not the silence of broken people, but the silence of women who have already made their choice. Sister Eleni walks at the front, still leading them with her hands bound. On the 7th morning, Hassan calls for her. She's taken alone to his tent. What happens next is not recorded in Ottoman documents. We know it from a letter written by a Venetian merchant who saw what came after, a letter found in 2003 in the archives of Dubrovnik. He writes, I saw them bring her back at dawn. She could not walk. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was not inside them any more. They dressed her in silk and paraded her as a convert. But when I passed near, I saw her lips moving. She was still praying in Latin, silently. She had not yielded. They had taken her body and left her soul wandering. This is the part of Ottoman strategy history doesn't explain. They didn't want martyrs. Martyrs inspire songs and legends. The dead become saints. Instead, they wanted ghosts. They wanted people who walked and breathed, but weren't fully there anymore. Living proof that resistance was useless. Living warnings to anyone who thought faith could stand against empire. Sister Eleni walked with them the rest of the way to the coast, but she never spoke again, never met anyone's eyes. She was present, but gone. The younger sisters sobbed when they saw her. The older ones just prayed harder. At the port of Volos, they're loaded onto a galley, a huge warship with wooden benches in rows and chains bolted into the planks. This isn't a passenger ship. It's a floating prison, a machine built to control bodies. The nuns are chained to the benches, wrists locked to iron rings. A ship's manifest, discovered in 1987 in the Topkapi Palace Museum, doesn't list their names, just a line: religious captives, female 18, destination, imperial household, purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word service is doing a lot of work. The voyage takes 12 days. The sea is cruel. Storms hammer the deck. Salt burns their split lips. The ship lurches and groans. Women who have never seen the ocean retch until there's nothing left in their stomachs. At night, the youngest, Sister Magdalena, whispers psalms under her breath. Her voice is so faint it almost disappears under the roar of the waves. But the other captives, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men, and women chained near, by turn their heads to listen. For a moment it feels like even the sea goes quiet. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the sisters see the skyline of Constantinople rise before them. Domes, minarets, endless walls. The city glows in the dawn like a blade. For centuries, this was called the city of the world's desire. Now it will become their cage. From the docks, they are marched through narrow streets crowded with merchants, soldiers, slaves. People stop and stare. Christian nuns among the prisoners. This is rare, even in an empire built on conquest. This is special. They're led past the ancient walls into the imperial district, past gardens where fountains murmur and peacocks scream. Then, in the shadow of Hagia Sophia, the great church now turned mosque, they're forced to halt and kneel. As the call to prayer echoes from the minarets, one of the sisters whispers, "We are home," but it is no longer ours. They're taken to the palace, but not to its grand audience halls or shining courtyards, not to the places where ambassadors bow and viziers scheme. They're taken below, down stone steps twisting into the dark, through tunnels that smell of rot and damp, to a place that officially doesn't exist. If you're still here, still listening, it's because some part of you understands this story matters. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, not for us, but for them. For the voices swallowed by silence, now we follow them into the dark. Beneath Topkapi Palace lies a maze of passages tourists never see. Storage rooms, servants' quarters, forgotten corridors winding through stone like veins. And in the farthest corner, sealed off for centuries, a room with no official purpose. In 2011, during restoration work, archaeologists broke through a false wall. What they found froze them in place. Carved into the stone were crosses, dozens of them, small, rough, scratched with fingernails or broken pottery. And under those crosses in Latin, 4 words, lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This was their chapel. For months, maybe years, these women lived beneath the palace, working as silent servants by day, scrubbing floors, washing linens, feeding fires in rooms they were never allowed to enter. And at night, after the palace slept, they slipped into this hidden room and prayed. They had no priest, no altar, no Bible, only memory. They recited psalms from recall, half-remembered verses reshaped into prayers that kept them sane. They sang hymns in whispers so soft the stone barely caught them. They shared communion with bread stolen from the kitchens and water drawn from palace wells. And they carved their faith into the walls, one scratch at a time, knowing that no one might ever see it. Sister Magdalena was there. The girl who whispered psalms on the ship, who carried Sister Irene along the road, who refused to look away when they paraded Ilani in silk. She became their voice in the dark. The archaeologists found her mark too, a small bird scratched into the corner of the wall. Next to it, 23 short lines, one for each sister. Only 11 of those lines were finished. The rest faded off into nothing. They used broken pottery as candle holders, a scrap of linen as an altar cloth. From a fragment of shattered mirror, they made a crude cross. In this secret chapel, they gathered each night. No sermons, no big speeches, just whispers. One by one, each woman knelt and shared a memory. Her village, her church bell, the smell of bread at dawn. Those memories became their new psalms, tiny offerings to a god they believed could still find them underground. A Venetian prisoner held for ransom in 1478 wrote about strange sounds beneath the harem. Women, he claimed, singing in Latin to a god not of this empire. For centuries, scholars brushed it off as myth. Then they found the chapel. But here's the part that breaks you. The crosses stop. Halfway across the wall, the carvings grow jagged, chaotic. The lines cut deeper, as if someone carved harder, faster, more desperately. Then nothing. Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of palace staff under the new sultan. Anyone judged unproductive or defiant was removed, and no details. No names, no graves, just one word in careful Ottoman script. Disposed. The nuns of St. Catherine disappeared from history. 18 women who walked 7 days through hell, who crossed a raging sea in chains, who carved prayers into stone in the dark. Gone. But their chapel remained. In 1712, a French diplomat wrote about a rumor from older palace servants that on some nights, in the lower halls, the air turned cold, and if you listened closely, you could hear women singing in Latin. He dismissed it as superstition, stories told by uneducated workers, but the walls don't lie. In 2011, when archaeologists studied the chapel more carefully, they found traces of wax, not from Ottoman candles, but from something older, mixed with herbs, the kind of candles nuns made in convents. Which means their vigil lasted longer than anyone guessed, months, maybe years, carving crosses, whispering prayers, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's bird is the last clear mark on the wall. Next to it, scratched so faintly you almost miss it, 2 words in Greek, we endure. But the truth is, they did more than endure. They left behind something power couldn't wipe away. A room full of crosses. A prayer cut into stone, proof that faith could survive where chains and walls could not. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922, 600 years of conquest and control. But in the end, it wasn't the Sultan's decrees that survived. Not Hassan Pasha's records, not the silk they forced onto Ilani. It was 4 Latin words carved by women the world tried to forget. Lux in tenebris lucit. The light shines in the darkness. So why does this story matter? Because it isn't just about religion. It isn't just about the Ottomans. It's about what power does when it tries to erase people. And what happens when those people refuse to vanish. The Ottoman Empire ruled for centuries. They took 3 continents, redrew borders, changed languages, rebuilt cultures, turned the greatest cathedral in Christendom into a mosque. Their influence stretched from Vienna's gates to the sands of Arabia. And yet, they couldn't erase 18 women who scratched prayers into stone. Think about that. An empire with armies, cannons, wealth, and the will to reshape the world, up against women whose only tools were their fingernails and their faith. And the women won, not in the way empires count victory. They didn't get back their convent. They didn't convert their captors. They didn't live to see freedom, but they left a mark. We always hear, history is written by the victors. Maybe. But memory is written by the survivors, and sometimes survival looks like a cross carved in darkness where no one was meant to see it. A prayer whispered in a language conquerors tried to silence. A bird scratched into stone to remember the sisters who fell. Centuries later, we found it anyway. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." These women walked forward, straight into darkness. They marched 7 days knowing they might die. They crossed the sea in chains knowing what waited for them. They went down into tunnels under a palace knowing they might never see daylight again. And still, they carved their prayers, trusting that someday, someone would look back and find them. You just did. In 2011, standing in that hidden chapel, staring at those crosses, one archaeologist asked a question that still haunts me. How long did they keep the vigil? The wax traces suggest years. The depth of some carvings shows repeated effort, carved again and again, which means these women met night after night, year after year, in almost total darkness, and refused to stop believing, even when sisters disappeared, even when the marks on the wall stopped multiplying, even when hope should have died, they kept scratching crosses into stone. That isn't just faith, that's pure defiance. The Ottoman Empire is gone now, dissolved in 1922. Its sultans are dust, its armies are stories, the palace stands but as a museum. Tourists wander its halls with cameras, never knowing what lies under their feet. But those crosses are still there. And that Latin phrase, worn and faint after 500 years, still whispers the same truth. Lux in tenebris lucid. The light shines in the darkness. The light shines in the darkness. It comes from the Gospel of John, a verse about a light that cannot be put out, a truth that survives even when everything else is taken. Sister Magdalena carved those words knowing she would never escape that palace, knowing her name would vanish, knowing the world would keep turning without her. But she carved them anyway, because she understood something empires never seem to learn. You can conquer land, you can rewrite history, you can cross out names in ledgers and hide bodies in unmarked graves. But you cannot kill what people carry inside their hearts, and you cannot silence what they carve into stone. You've just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. If stories like this remind you how fragile humanity is, how easily voices can be erased, then subscribe to Crimson Historians and help keep the past alive, because some voices deserve to be heard, even if they were silenced centuries ago. Especially then, the nuns of St. Catherine were meant to vanish. That was the goal: erase them, break them, turn them into converts, ghosts, or footnotes buried in Ottoman records. But they didn't disappear. They live on in those carved crosses, in that Latin prayer, in the chapel uncovered after 5 centuries. And now they live here with you, because you listened, because you remembered, because you refused to let their silence be the last chapter. Lux in tenebris lucet, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.